Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Lisney, and in this episode, we take you to Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada for exercise Red Flag. We'll also have an operational update in Reheat, but first, see if you can identify this noise.
Motor, go. Reversing left now. Motor, go, and roll. Out, rolling, out.
Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, exercise Red Flag maximises the combat readiness, capability and survivability of participating units. It's now a regular event for the Royal Air Force. Today we'll hear from Flight Lieutenant Buzz, an RAF Typhoon pilot, on his first Red Flag. He talks to one of the experienced United States Air Force aggressor pilots he'll be up against. Our correspondent is Squadron Leader Peter Singlehurst.
You guys as aggressors are the best in the world at what you do, and that we can expect as accurate a threat replication as going up against the real thing.
We're trying to present you a representative threat picture and capability so that you can fight against kind of a standard train. And we've also got Raptors that, I mean, they weren't purpose-built for it, but they sure as heck can do it. And you see yourself across the merge from one of those, you get your work cut out for you, for sure.
Buzz, first time on Red Flag. Reflections so far?
It's massive, complicated. There's certainly a lot more aircraft in one place than I've ever seen before, especially driving down that flight line and seeing 5th gen after 5th gen after 5th gen, and there's some 4th gen and 5th gen, and then there's, it's a little bit overwhelming at times, but awesome, especially airborne, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, Nellis is a unique place in the sense that just the number and type of aircraft that we have here, just this, like you said, you can drive down the flight line and there's Raptors and F-35s and F-15s of every variety and F-16s. It's even just the home station is a little bit overwhelming. So when everybody comes in from out of town, and you see even more people on the ramp, it's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had to drive from my ops building to my jet anywhere anyway. So to do
it's just walked out. And right there.
So to do a half a mile drive past however many Raptors and F-35s to do that is a new experience.
Well, and then I'm sure taxiing is a new experience too, just with the number of people that are all trying to get around the ramp at the same time. It's uncontrolled awesome. Taxi and
obviously getting used to the way things seem to happen at American base. It's my first time flying out of an American base anyway. But there's nothing quite like my first famille rolling onto the runway as a 4-ship and having a 4-ship of Raptors pass me on the right hand side, taking off on the other runway. I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, at least they're on your side. Right?
This is true.
So
Well, most of them were, I think. Yeah.
When we pass all those 5th gen, it just makes us disappointed that, like, man, this is gonna be a tough fight today.
Yeah.
So, but it is definitely a unique experience. I think a lot of people, their first times at Nellis, have that same experience. Because I was in your shoes probably 5 years ago or so. Came in for my first Red Flag from the unit that I was with at the time, and same thing, just like, oh wow, like there's so many things going on. There's so many different airplanes. Like, how are we going to get everybody airborne into the airspace and like not run into each other? And,
that in itself is a masterpiece.
Yes,
like blows my mind every time. Yeah.
Have you been on nights or days?
I've done only days so far, which has been something relief. But I'm on to nights next week.
Yep, same here.
Which, I'll see you there.
Yeah, that's it. Well,
see the merge.
Hopefully so. So hopefully I actually get to see you. But a lot of times we end up dead well before we ever get to the merge. But the nighttime is an even more interesting experience. Just the deconfliction plan has to be that much more spot on. There's that much that less room for error. But it is definitely unique to Nellis being able to get that many aircraft in the air and actually put together a fight. So
nice. So how many times had you been hit before as blue before you?
I had been to, I think, 3 red flags as blue before I ever came here as an aggressor.
Yeah.
So luckily my last unit, though, we were out here quite frequently. So the unit that I was a part of before was one of the only Block 50 Viper units in the continental U.S.
Right.
So we got pulled in for all the exercises here. So by the time I showed up to Nellis, I actually was joking that they were just letting me come home finally. That I'd actually been TDY to South Carolina the whole time. They're finally letting me come home to Nellis because I'd spent so much time here.
Yeah.
That was, I think I've done 3 on the blue side, and I think I've since done 9 or 10 on the red side. So
you've probably seen just about everything.
You'd think that, but then there's guys older than me who they've seen 20 red flags and they've really seen everything.
Yeah.
You start to establish kind of common trends and like things that people are going to mess up, things that are going to be challenges. It seems like every time we do this, we have to solve some of the same problems in slightly different, unique ways, and it just depends on who's actually here, right? Because you get especially these flags with international partners, and there's just different ways of doing things and different challenges that we have to face every single time. So it's never the same. Basically, it's always a unique challenge and event. So
how much do you know about, like us, for example, coming here with Typhoon? How much do you know about us before we get here, and what you can expect in terms of capabilities and how we're going to behave and what we're going to do?
Honestly, not a whole lot. From a red perspective, we are less concerned with really truly understanding like your TTPs and tactics and things like that. We are focused more on presenting you our TTPs, right?
Sure.
And trying to be as realistic a threat as we possibly can be for you. And so that way we are kind of agnostic to whoever shows up, right? So it's not like, oh, hey, the UK showing up with their Typhoons and their F-35s, like this is kind of how they do their tactics, so this is how we can counter them. It's not so much that, so much as it is we are trying to present you a representative threat picture and capability so that you can fight against kind of a standard training aid. Gotcha. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So what like, I guess to throw that question back at you, like what were you told to expect in terms of the range and the threats and the aggressors and everything else?
Mass more than anything. Be prepared that there'll be more aircraft than like our radar format. There'll be more on that or less on that, seeing as so much of your 5th gen these days. Than you've probably ever seen before back in the UK in training. But also, that you guys as aggressors are the best in the world at what you do, and that we can expect as accurate a threat replication as going up against the real thing.
Right.
Which is something which we do back in the UK, but certainly not to the extent where you guys here do it.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, how do you, like, when you're home station, like, do you just fight against, like, Typhoon v. Typhoon, and you have your own kind of threat replication that you use, or?
Yeah, a lot of the time, especially for visual air combat, whereas beyond visual range, we do a lot of stuff with corporate partners like Draken. I've seen them out on the line.
Sure.
Yeah. So that they help us out back home. But nothing like what you guys have, what we're going up against. The best part is going up against other actual fighter aircraft of different types doing actual ACT.
Right.
Which is obviously not something we get to do
and
really back home.
We've massively benefited over the last few years of having started to incorporate more of those 5th gen assets, because I mean that's been the request from Blue, from the CAF, and from our partners that come in. Is like, we recognize the actual threat that our adversaries have these 4++ and borderline 5th gen aircraft, and we need to train against something that's realistic. And so to start being able to incorporate that, like we have 2 aggressors now, like actual aggressors who are F-35 pilots.
Right.
And so that's why when you see like the F-35s on the red side, like they have worked to build that into a representative threat to kind of show you that 5th gen replication. So having that capability has definitely, if you had been to a different red flag, say a year or 2 years ago, I think what you would see the biggest difference is the number and type of red air. So like the number of people that we have on the red side these days, every sortie we have 8 to 10 what we call augies or augmentees, and it's all Blue Air folks that are coming over to fly with us.
Yep.
And that has significantly increased over the last few years, just to have representative numbers, representative types, capabilities that we just can't do with just our F-16s. Obviously, we work very hard to provide the best replication that we can with what we have. But I mean, our resources are limited just like everybody else's.
Sure.
And so to be able to incorporate some of those other capabilities and those other assets to present that picture to you is massively helpful. And I think you've probably seen that since you've been here, just like going up against the types of threats.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I think one of the biggest things I've taken from it actually has been the planning sides of it and really getting involved. We do LFEs back home, obviously, and some of them are pretty big, including strike guys from Lake and Heath and whatnot, so they get involved. But being here and seeing the scope of the planning and getting involved in that, and that's been awesome, seeing behind the scenes of that, not just turning up to the flight.
I was gonna say, have you been through kind of a mission planning day with anybody?
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. Yeah, that I've managed to sit in on a few, dipping in and out. Obviously, COVID has its restrictions, and rooms are only so big, and there's so many people, right? And I'm just a JP, so I've only got so much that I can bring. But sitting there and listening is invaluable in places like this. I guess it's as good as it gets. Yeah,
and really that's what Red Flag is for. Is it's not for the weapons officers or the squadron commanders. Like, it's really for guys like you who, this is your first opportunity to see a really large scale LFE and what that looks like, especially with coalition partners. Yeah. And I'm sure your leadership is trying to get you, involved in as many different things as you possibly can.
Sure.
Just to see how all that stuff works. I mean, that's the whole intent of Red Flag is for the young wingmen to expose you guys to that level of planning, that level of execution, and then especially that level of debrief where you get 150 people in the room and you spend 2 or 3 hours going through the shot file and really digging out like the actual truth data of what happened, so that you can pull real lessons learned and learn those things. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that surprised me most, actually, because from the outside, Red Flag is. Especially as someone, relatively junior fighter pilot, it's quite an intimidating prospect. But then once you get here, the emphasis on it being training, like the reassurance that this is training for everyone. And the whole purpose of this is for us to get better, be better, understand everyone's strengths, everyone's weaknesses, and come up with the best way to move forward. That surprised me a little bit, because I was, I thought this was going to be just a constant barrage of "you are not very good," which wouldn't have surprised me, but it's also been a real.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We as Red Air would love to do that every single time, right? We would love to go out there and just kick your teeth in every single time and really make you regret that you ever showed up. But what we do honestly on the Red side is we kind of run a spectrum between DLO management, right? Like learning objective management and accurate, realistic threat replication, right? And so we could go full one side of that realistic threat replication and just, stomp your teeth. But to some extent we kind of ramp it up over the course of the 3 weeks because the point is for training, right? Like, it's not that we, and White Force will tell you this, it's not that we are like trying to hand you an easy win just to like make you feel good. But we are going to put certain caps and limits on things we have so many limitations as it is anyway. One of which is as large as the knitter is, it's still relatively restrictive, and especially with the types of threats and the types of weapons that both Blue and Red uses, that that airspace is not as big as it could be. And so we do have to sometimes limit ourselves just based on the limitations of the airspace and the range and things like that. But yeah, no, that I'm glad that you have seen that, and that the impression that you've gotten is that it is very much a training focused exercise. It is there to give you that experience of the large force exercise and the chaos that can ensue, kind of that fog of war mentality.
Do you actually get to see the aircraft from the other side?
With any luck, yeah. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. I think like we were talking about it depends on how well we execute our tactics and how well they're working, and then how well Blue executes their tactics. But for us, yeah, I've definitely, I've gone to merges with aircraft before. We use a ground controller that goes by a call sign Baron, right? And Baron is very they're very directive with us, to include look comm. So they'll tell us to look, 2 o'clock high, 2 miles Raptor or something like that. And they'll give us look comm, to where we're trying to pick up tally on you once we get inside. Now, at a certain point, obviously, like if we go to a visual merge, like if I end up seeing you across the circle, then the DLO is kind of already met, right? Like you didn't kill me in time for me to come in and actually, convert on you. But it's definitely not uncommon. I've definitely had several times that I've gone to merges, and especially when you have larger aircraft out there like B-52s and you can see them from 20 miles away, and so it's not hard to tag them. But I don't know. Have you gone any merges yet?
Not yet. So yeah, either I'm doing something right or something very wrong, and dying right at the back of the fight. But no, I'm looking forward to it though, because have you measured the Typhoon?
I have not yet.
Probably for the best.
I've heard good things about it. So
yeah, it's where we want to be. It's what it was built for.
Right.
So hopefully before I go home, I'll get the opportunity to merge with someone, whether it's a Viper or.
I was going to say we've got Vipers on our side, which were purpose built for BFM, and we've also got Raptors that they weren't purpose built for it, but they sure as heck can do it.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah. So that's you see yourself across the merge from one of those, you get your work cut out for you for sure.
Yeah, no time.
And we've got a bunch of older wily guys in the aggressors that have been flying BFM for years.
I'm sure there's some dirty tricks.
Yeah,
dirty
absolutely.
tricks in the pockets.
Yeah, although flying against a Typhoon, that's a little bit of an unknown quantity. So
that's kind of why I'm looking forward to it, right?
Right.
It's not something that I guess those guys would be as well, because it's not something they get to do very often, if ever, unless it's on exercises like this.
We do emphasize that this is training. This is not real war, and so there are some points where you have to kind of pull the fangs back in and do what's safe rather than what's the most tactical. But this is like the red flag provides you that opportunity to get mixed up in those situations where you're kind of like not really sure which way is up, and you're getting point outs and you're not sure who's where, and so that's the point. But
yeah, well, I hope the opportunity, especially seeing as the weather is always gin clear, blue skies.
See, now you've jinxed it.
Sorry. But yeah,
it's gonna be cloudy the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Whereas back home, it's such a quite often that'll be exactly the case. We'll be fighting IMC beyond visual range anyway. So by the time we get within range, it's clouds you blow through. So
you're all like non-maneuvering, you're on restricted maneuvering, and no, it's. The weather here is definitely provides a lot of good opportunities, but
I'm desperate for the opportunity to merge with someone else.
Just hope you merge with F-35. They're fast.
Yeah, they'll be fine. Yeah, bring it on. Or B-52. I'll take that as well. I'll take what I can get.
That's a whole different animal. Let me tell you. Like when you merge with a B-52. Because I've definitely tried to be the clever young wingman. This is in a red flag years and years ago. And I was trying to gun the buff.
Yeah.
So I thought that would be. I was like, I want to go gun the B-52. It would be a great idea. Yeah. And I come saddled behind that thing, and I was like, holy crap, that's a big airplane. And so I went trigger on, started shooting him, called the guns kill, and came back and looked at my tapes, and I was like 5,000 feet away. I was like a mile behind the guy. I was like, that's as close as I ever want to be to the B-52 airborne.
Yeah.
So.
But that feels the canopy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're kind of like, who do I shoot at? Like, I don't know, do I shoot at that engine pod or that engine pod? Or, but yeah, that's, and you can see them from so far away. It's out here, it's like cheating, almost. So.
This is Reheat, where we take a look at the RAF's contribution to NATO operations across Europe. 2 F-35Bs have been carrying out enhanced vigilance activity in Estonia. That's the NATO-led air policing operation initiated in response to the ongoing events in Ukraine. The Lightnings have been based at Amari Air Base and supported by personnel from the RAF and Royal Navy. Group Captain Philip Marr, the station commander of RAF Marham, said the operation was critical while global leaders continued their efforts to de-escalate the situation in Ukraine. The UK ambassador to Estonia, Ross Allen, welcomed the extra capability, saying it adds to both deterrence and reassurance. The Lightnings joined Typhoons also operating in the region, which are patrolling NATO airspace over Poland and Romania. Elsewhere, RAF Typhoons have taken part in a fly-past over the Lithuanian capital Vilnius to mark the country's independence from the Soviet Union in 1990. Flying from Zokniai Air Force Base, they were joined by a pair of Polish F-16s for the ceremony, which was observed by dignitaries including the Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda. Brian Olley, the British ambassador to the country, said taking part in the restoration of Independence Day celebrations was a tangible demonstration of the UK's unwavering commitment to the NATO defence of the Baltic region. And RAF F-35Bs and Poseidon maritime reconnaissance aircraft have joined 30,000 troops from 27 nations for the largest cold weather exercise in Norway since the 1980s. Exercise Cold Response aims to train allies and partners to operate together in some of the world's harshest environments. The month-long exercise has seen jets from 617 Squadron take part in a simulated air battle controlled by Royal Navy fighter controllers on board HMS Prince of Wales. And that's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise.
Motor, go. Reversing, left, now. Motor, go, and roll. Out, rolling, out.
That was the sound of communications between the RAF Red Arrows during a practice display over RAF Scampton. The Red Arrows are one of the world's premier aerobatic display teams, representing the speed, agility and precision of the Royal Air Force. Flying distinctive Hawk T1 jets, the team is made up of pilots, engineers and essential support staff with frontline operational experience. All Red Arrows pilots have flown operationally in aircraft such as the Typhoon FGR-4 and helped secure the skies every day of the year. The clear and simple verbal commands given between pilots, including smoke on, roll and holding the bank, are exactly how the Reds managed to maintain such tight precision at high speeds during their displays.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.